In this lesson, we're going to start looking at the pieces that make up that introductory web app. Here for quick review is that web app. It's a simple two-page affair. The first page is an input form, as you can see, 1, 2, 3, and we click the button and we get the second page, which is the response page, which gives us the answer. Let me turn to my Emacs editor. There are three pieces in this first web app. There's the HTML page. We're looking at that. We'll get into some detail momentarily. There's a deployment file called web.xml. That's sometimes described as the deployment descriptor. We'll look at that momentarily. And then there's a third file called convert.jsp, and we'll look at that in the next lesson. So in this lesson, we'll look at two of the three. As you can see, this is a very simple HTML page. It happens to be HTML5. It contains a little bit of embedding styling. So in a production grade example, we would want to break that out, put that in a style sheet. We'll do that sort of thing later. But the page and the styling are so simple that I've combined them for convenience. The page, by the way, is input.html. If you've done any HTML at all, you'll recognize some of these pieces. Let me get down to the essentials. Here's a form with an action, convert.jsp. In other words, when this form gets submitted by the web browser, convert.jsp is going to be the target. Tomcat is basically going to execute the code that's embedded in convert.jsp. We get into details later. And the HTTP method is post rather than get. Again, I'm going to put those details on the back burner for now. What's important is that we have an HTML form together with a submit button that's down here. When the submit button is pushed, the data embedded in the form will be sent to the web server. Now, the only HTML control in this form, other than the submit button, is basically this input box that you see at this line, and it's got some attributes: type equals text, name equals tempf, and for good measure, ID equals tempf. Some web frameworks focus on the ID attribute. Others, such as Java, and that's the important part, focus on the name attribute. So you can see here, I've got an attribute, which is just a key value pair with equals as the separator. Name is the key, and the value in this case is tempf. The name is arbitrary, but it's important for me to remember because my code needs it. So let me go back and refer to this convert.jsp page and give you the short version. In the short version, convert.jsp is going to say, in effect, give me the data in tempf. So I need to remember that name, whatever that name happens to be. The input form is straight HTML. We describe this in web speak as static HTML. In other words, there's no code in here whatsoever. So this is not an HTML template. This is just straight HTML. Now let me go to the deployment document called web.xml, and in Java, that's what it has to be called, web.xml, all lowercase. And this is a very simple version of such a file. As you can see by inspection, it's XML, and it's not too complicated in this example. Even in bigger examples, we may get into a web.xml that's about a page, occasionally maybe a page and a half, just to give you the sense of how big this file can become. But in this first example, it's very simple. Technically, web.xml is optional, but it would be indeed rare for you to have a web application that didn't have a deployment descriptor. That's what web.xml is sometimes described as, or a web descriptor. Now in this case, there's only one piece of information. It's the welcome file list, and the welcome file is input.html. So in the comment, I give you the long version. Let me here give you the short version. If a request comes in for the deployed war file, which is temp.war, but the request doesn't specify what's wanted inside that war file, then the welcome file kicks in. So in effect, what this line says is input.html is the default page. If somebody asks for the WAR file, but not for a specific item in it, give the requester input.html. So that means my URL, my request URL, can end with /temp instead of with /temp/input.html. This very quick overview of the first two pieces will help us when we look at the third piece, which contains the embedded code, so I'd like to do that in a separate lesson.